Story 1. A close friend of mine, who would absolutely love to gloat about this here, but can't due to rule number 4, it takes very little imagination to find the public notifications the case generated, gave me permission to tell this story. It begins with his impulsive decision to try out the paid features of a dating app for 1 week, for the usual reasons, sometime in the middle of 2018. He says he clicked through the paywall and was prompted to provide a credit card number, which he did, agreeing to pay $6.99. He saw nothing indicating it would be a recurring charge. Of course, this was naive, but being a guy just coming into the age where he had enough money to afford things like that, he didn't have much experience with tech companies. He says he wasn't much more impressed with the paid features than the free ones, so he just stopped using the app. He deleted it from his phone a couple of weeks later and pretty much forgot about it. Fast forward 3 months, and he notices a charge for $6.99 paid to Social Media Inc., or some similarly vague name. He looks into it further and realizes he's been paying that amount every week for months. He ends up calling his bank, which provided enough information for him to connect the dots. After searching unsuccessfully for a way to contact customer service, he re-downloaded the app, but found no obvious way to unsubscribe. He followed the help links, which provided instructions that didn't work. Eventually, he found an email address and sent a brief description of his problem. In return, he received a dismissive response, repeating the instructions from the help pages in the app. This kicked off a series of emails over the better part of a week, where he provided increasingly detailed information about the screens he encountered while trying to follow their instructions. In return, he received responses that became progressively more dismissive, and even condescending, until he finally received a set of slightly modified instructions that included updating the app. There had clearly been a bug, but there was no apology, and by this point, the time and effort it cost him had only added insult to injury. He requested a $45 refund for the weeks when he didn't even have the app installed, and was met with a scornful denial. Figuring others had likely been treated the same way, he decided to search for class action lawsuit against well-known dating app on Google, and sure enough, he was right. A law firm, located just 1 area code away, had filed a complaint on behalf of a group of people with similar complaints. He called the number, left a message, and about an hour later, received a return call from an attorney eager to hear his story. He was asked to gather some bank statements, records from the Google Play Store, and to write a few paragraphs describing his experience, which he provided in a neatly compiled PDF package. A week or so later, there was a second interview with the attorney and one of his colleagues, ending with them inviting him to be the lead plaintiff in their class action lawsuit. Fast forward 2.5 years, during which my friend invested maybe 20 or 30 hours, mostly in phone calls and one in-person meeting with the same 2 attorneys who, it turns out, were the entire firm. He received a phone call notifying him that the legal team for the giant tech firm had backed down as the court date approached and agreed to a settlement of $23 million. My friend received a modest 4-figure incentive award in return for being the lead plaintiff. The lawyers, I guess, did much better in return for their 2.5 years of work in what was a somewhat risky David and Goliath situation for them. The attorneys happily invited him to contact them if he ever encountered future injustices, which he has. But unfortunately, tech companies have become much more prone to including arbitration clauses in their terms, so this was probably a one-time victory for him. But in a world of increasingly predatory corporations that strive to squeeze consumers by trapping us in long-winded terms and conditions and monopolizing every corner of the economy, my friend now has a script for standing up for himself when he feels he's being taken advantage of. It goes something like this. I want to make you aware that I'm someone who takes the time to stand up for myself as a consumer. It's become sort of a hobby, and I'm quite good at it. I don't object to businesses making a fair profit, but if you're going to try to take advantage of me, I promise it won't be worth it. And if you doubt that I mean what I say, just do a Google search for his name versus dating app. Yes, it can be annoying. I should also mention that he has a very patient significant other. Story 2. This took place more than a decade ago. I started working for a small branch of a company and got along really well with my boss, the branch manager. I used to compare him to Michael Scott, though not to his face. In this scenario, I would have been Jim Halpert. After working there for a while, my boss was approached with a fantastic offer to manage a bigger branch a few hours away. This was because the owner wanted to place his son as the branch manager of a small location and needed to vacate a position to do so. My boss graciously turned down the offer because his kids had just started at their new schools, and he didn't want to uproot them again. He had relocated to take the current position. This was not taken well by our corporate office, but they couldn't fire him directly for it. A few weeks later, I saw our office manager, a lady nobody in the office liked, in my boss's office filing paperwork, or so it seemed, which was odd but not alarming. The next week, my boss was going to be on vacation, and all the office staff had to attend a meeting for non-salaried employees at the corporate headquarters. While we were at the corporate event, our office manager handed out new office keys to all of us three who were there. My boss was on vacation and salaried. I asked, "Why are we getting new keys?" She said it was because someone lost theirs. None of us had lost our keys. We were all sitting together and could easily confirm this. I texted my boss to ask him, and he had no idea what she was up to. I got a bad feeling about what was happening. I called him after the meeting and told him to come by my house Sunday when he got back from out of town. I explained that I was 95% certain they were planning to fire him on Monday. I didn't know the reason, I just had a gut feeling. I said it was too bad because if he was fired, I wouldn't want to work there anymore, knowing that they would do such shady things. He jokingly said he should fire me first so I could go on unemployment. I laughed and told him that he should write me a termination notice. If he didn't get fired on Monday, it would be just between us. But if he did get fired, I could take it to the unemployment office and have proof that I was fired for something that would make me eligible for benefits. So we did, and he was fired on Monday for misfiling paperwork of some sort. I definitely did not go back to work. They tried calling me in, and I told them that my boss had already fired me. I took the proof with me to the unemployment office and was good to go until they, the former employer, disputed my claim. I had a hearing on the phone with the unemployment office and my corporate human resources person. Human resources. He wasn't fired. The paperwork he submitted with his claim isn't the right paperwork. It should have come from human resources, not his manager. Unemployment office. Why did the manager not do that then? Where is he? Human resources. He no longer works for the company. Unemployment office. Why did he leave? Human resources. He was fired. Unemployment office. Why was he fired? Getting exasperated. Human resources. Mumbles for doing paperwork incorrectly. Unemployment office. Well, that is hardly the fault of the terminated employee. How is he to know that the paperwork is invalid if it is coming from their supervisor? They told my human resources that they could rehire me or not, but my claim was valid. They couldn't rehire me because they'd already filled the position. So I gotta collect unemployment for a while before moving on to my next job. My former boss is doing well now, it seems, and I don't feel bad at all. For the record, it is very likely that they would have invented a way of firing me after they got rid of my boss. Had they done that, they would have made certain that my termination was such that I wouldn't be eligible for unemployment. I took that power away from them by getting fired preemptively. I am also positive that when I saw the office manager in his office while he was away, she was arranging the setup for him to be fired. Story 3. This was about 2 years ago, while I was living at my buddy's place. His place wasn't in the best part of town, so theft happens all the time, and for the large part, most of these crimes are met with a sucks-to-be-you attitude from the police, who then create a report and forget anything happened entirely. Okay, so I woke up early on Thursday morning with a call from my roommate who was running to work at 5 a.m., and he explained the detached garage has been broken into. The thief broke in through the window and stole a bunch of stuff with highlights being Milwaukee drills, motorcycle jackets, and the receiver and the sub from one of those surround sound systems in a box packages deals, but leaves the speakers around the rest of the place. Saying I was livid is an understatement. I work hard for my things and have no intention of replacing them so some jerk can sell them for a very small profit. So for the next 4 days, my focus was entirely on this, and you'll see why shortly. So, I know the chances are slim that I will ever find my stuff, but hey, it can't hurt to look for it on the common online sales places. I used eBay searching local sellers only, and I put alerts on Craigslist, an extremely handy feature. And I told my roommate to keep an eye on Craigslist since he has a little time. So fast forward to Friday, my roommate calls me up and tells me he thinks he found our stuff on Craigslist. I pull up the ad and sure as heck, there it is. This beautiful not too bright gentleman had taken all the stuff he took from us and put it into a single ad in the barter section of Craigslist. He even added the model numbers, not serial numbers, making things very easy to identify. The giveaway was this cheap surround sound system, for which he only had the receiver and the sub, and after a quick search reveals this particular system is only sold as a package. You can't buy the single components, so this was definitely our stuff. I called the police, thinking case closed, but guess what? They don't care that I found this stuff on Craigslist, and after about 20 minutes of complaining on the phone with non-emergency, they asked me what I wanted them to do. I said, "Send a car over here. I want to speak with someone directly." So they reluctantly send a car with a very nice officer who runs the number associated with the Craigslist ad, and guess what? He's got a rap sheet a mile long and has been arrested like 10 times for theft. With the break in the case, I think I'm home free. But nope, the cop can't do anything. The investigator needs to take care of this, the officer says and leaves. So I call the investigator who doesn't work on Fridays. I ask who I can speak with, so they send me up to the investigator's team line, to which no one answers at all. I try again on Saturday and learn that investigators don't work weekends at all, and I'd have to wait until Monday before I can talk to my investigator. Good thing crime doesn't happen on weekends, otherwise cops would be in trouble. So I call on Monday, and the sergeant is apparently out for being sick. It was at that point I was done trying to call them. I drove to the police station and demanded to speak with an investigator. I mentioned to this new investigator the situation and the name of the guy who was in the Craigslist ad, and the cop knows him very well and has arrested him on a couple occasions. The cop is confident the police can now help me since I've already done all the work here. Finally, the cops tell me to make a meeting with this guy and let him know when and where. So again, the work is on me. Thanks, police. So I text him a few times with no response. Then I call him and joke around and express interest in a variety of items, most of which are mine, but a few that aren't. Since simply asking for the things from one of the victims is suspicious in my mind. So I tell him I'm Christmas shopping. I then say I'm from out of the area and ask him to pick the location, and he lists off a few places, one of which is a grocery store within eyesight of the police station. So I pick that and laugh to myself at how this is turning out. I call the cops to let them know the deal is on, and when and where it is. They say they'll be in an unmarked car, and that I should take my wallet out as a sign to swoop in to make the arrest. So I pulled into the parking lot. I see no cops and I stop and wait. I was about to think the guy was a no-show when he finally showed up 10 minutes late. My heart is pounding at this point. I get out, meet the mastermind criminal, and shake his hand. He proceeds to pull out my stereo, then my drills and a few other odds and ends, and before I can get my wallet out, a gold Taurus car speeds in, and out pops 3 cops with guns drawn, and they cuff the guy. When this happened, I just turned around and walked away for a second while they put him in the car. The lead cop asks me if this is my stuff, and I say yes, it matches with the previously provided, very detailed description I gave the police. All the while the guy in cuffs is yelling that that's his stuff. Finally, the cops get the warrant for his apartment and find the rest of all of our stuff and a few other people's things, and I have all my stuff back by Wednesday the following week. He received 1.5 years in a state penitentiary for his efforts. I kinda fixate sometimes, and he got unlucky by stealing from someone who didn't just claim renter's insurance. Advice: record the serial numbers on everything you own. Cell phone, computer, TV, router, stereo, etc. If you can give that to the police, you have a stronger chance to get your stuff back. Pawn shops need to report all serial numbers that come through. Story 4. My parents got me this awesome new bike for my birthday last month, and I've been taking it out every chance I get. We moved to this fancy gated community about 6 months ago. My dad got a promotion at work, and my parents thought it would be a good idea to upgrade our living situation. At first, I was excited about the big houses and the nice lawns, but I quickly realized that living here came with a whole bunch of rules. There's this group called the Homeowners Association HOA that seems to control everything in the neighborhood. They have all these strict rules about what color you can paint your house, how tall your grass can be, and even what kind of decorations you can put up during holidays. It's pretty annoying, if you ask me. Anyway, last Saturday, I decided to take my bike out for a spin. It was a beautiful day, and I wanted to explore some of the streets I hadn't been down yet. I was cruising along the sidewalk, enjoying the breeze in my hair, when suddenly this angry-looking woman stepped right in front of me. She started yelling at me before I could even hit the brakes. The woman demanded that I stop immediately. When I asked her what was wrong, she angrily explained that I was riding my bike on the sidewalk, which she claimed was against HOA rules. I was confused. I'd never heard of any rule saying I couldn't ride my bike on the sidewalk. In fact, my parents had always told me it was safer than riding on the street. I tried to apologize and explain that I didn't understand, as I had always ridden my bike there. The woman, who identified herself as a member of the HOA board, insisted that I clearly hadn't been paying attention to the rules. She firmly stated that no bikes were allowed on the sidewalk. I attempted to explain that I was unaware of this rule, but she refused to listen. Her anger only seemed to escalate. I apologized again and told her I would go home, hoping to defuse the situation. But as I tried to turn my bike around, she did something I never expected. She grabbed onto my handlebars and started shaking the bike violently. She yelled that I wasn't going anywhere until she taught me a lesson about following the rules. I was scared and tried to hold on, but she was much stronger than me. Before I knew it, I was falling. I hit the ground hard, scraping my elbow and knee. My bike clattered onto the sidewalk next to me. I cried out in pain, asking her why she had done that. She coldly replied that it would teach me to break the rules in her neighborhood. I couldn't believe what had just happened. This grown woman had just pushed me off my bike. I was hurt, scared, and angry all at the same time. Luckily, one of my neighbors had seen the whole thing and rushed over to help me. The neighbor confronted the woman, asking her what she thought she was doing and pointing out that I was just a child. The woman defended her actions, claiming she was enforcing the rules. The neighbor argued back, stating there was no such rule, and that even if there was, it didn't give her the right to assault a child. The neighbor helped me up and made sure I was okay, while the woman just stood there, red-faced and fuming. By this time, other people had come out of their houses to see what all the commotion was about. Someone called my parents, and they arrived just a few minutes later. When they saw my scraped-up arm and knee, they were furious. My dad immediately confronted the woman. My dad angrily asked if she had pushed me off my bike. The woman tried to justify her actions, claiming she had the authority to enforce HOA regulations as a board member. My mom jumped in, pointing out that there was no rule against riding bikes on the sidewalk, and that regardless, the woman had no right to put her hands on their child. Things got pretty heated after that. More neighbors joined in, all of them backing us up and telling the woman she was way out of line. Someone had called the police, and when they arrived, they took statements from everyone who had witnessed what happened. To my surprise, the woman was actually arrested right there on the spot. The officers explained that pushing a kid off his bike is considered assault, HOA board member or not. They informed her that she would be facing charges for her actions. In the days that followed, we learned that the woman had a history of bullying behavior in the neighborhood. Lots of people came forward with stories about how she had harassed them over minor HOA violations. Some even said they had been too scared to report her before. The HOA board quickly voted to remove the woman from her position. They also clarified that there was no rule against riding bikes on sidewalks and apologized to my family for the incident. As for me, I got a few scrapes and bruises, but I was mostly just shaken up by the whole experience. My parents decided to press charges against the woman, and we later found out that she was convicted of assault and ordered to pay a fine and do community service. The silver lining in all of this was that our neighborhood became a much friendlier place after the woman was gone. People started talking to each other more, and the HOA eased up on some of their stricter rules. I even noticed more kids out riding their bikes, without any fear of being yelled at or pushed over. I still love riding my bike around the neighborhood, but now I do it with a newfound appreciation for standing up against bullies and the importance of community. Story 5. I have entitled parents, but I will speak about my so-called dad first. I am trying to be as objective as possible here. My so-called dad has always worked low-paying jobs. He immigrated to Canada in the 1970s and never did much to move beyond being a line cook. Some might say it's good that he didn't abandon the family, but honestly, he was never really present. He would work, come home late, eat, and then head back to work. He never had a real conversation with me, and if I had to guess, he's spoken maybe 100 words to me in total, things like, go to sleep. 100 words in the past 40 years. Beyond that, I remember 4 incidents from when I was around 5 to 8 years old. The first incident was when I started yelling for my mom at a shopping mall because she went to get something quickly. My so-called dad panicked and punched me in the nose. I was bleeding, and people were staring. The second time was at a restaurant. He accidentally walked into the women's restroom while I was following him. He panicked, shoved me against the wall, and slammed the door into my forehead, calling me a fool. The third time was when I flipped off a driver, and the guy came out of his car, yelling at me. My so-called dad panicked and started throwing a fit inside our car. The fourth incident happened while I was practicing the piano. He told me I wasn't playing well enough and hit me in the back. As you can see, there's no real relationship between us. This is the extent of our interactions. To paint a clearer picture of his character, my family did try to help him over the years. My uncle and my aunt's husband both tried. My uncle offered him a job at a used car dealership as a bookkeeper. However, my uncle would often rant about how my dad was always slacking off. My dad even complained to my uncle's friends that he was given a slow car to drive. This was just a perk, a car he could take home, and the comment really annoyed my uncle. On another occasion, my aunt's husband hired him at his company. His job was to manage the workers in the warehouse, and the workers didn't speak English. The requirement was simple: don't speak English to them, because they would find it disrespectful. But my dad insisted on speaking English to them. He even made up his own holidays. My aunt had to explain to him that these holidays might exist in other countries, but they weren't observed here, and he needed to follow the local calendar. For both jobs, he was eventually fired, and he attributed it to bias from my aunt and uncle. They paid him extra when they let him go because they cared about me. In his last job, a family friend who hired him called my mom to ask her to talk to him, as he was taking more breaks than he should have. There were always unhealthy amounts of arguments at home over finances, so I grew up thinking that being poor was normal. Fast forward 30 years, and as I started raising my own kids, things didn't add up. I never hit my kids, and I always talked to them. I participated in all their sports events and took days off when they were sick. We are in a better financial position, but that has nothing to do with my parents. I simply worked smart and hard. I even purchased their house by paying well above the market price, though the deed is still in their name. At one point, they moved in with us because we thought they would help with the kids. For the first 4 years, they helped by dropping the kids off at school and picking them up, and that was it. One day, out of nowhere, my dad said, "We should only be helping occasionally." Okay, so picking up and dropping off the kids wasn't light enough? Then the pandemic hit, and we started working from home, so we took full responsibility for the pickups and drop-offs. Now, here's where things started to really frustrate me. We kindly asked them to leave our house 2 years ago. The house isn't big enough for a growing family, and yet my parents told me to get lost. This is my house, which I am still paying for, on top of paying for their house, which they rented out and are keeping the income from. My dad also steals food meant for my kids. We would save food for them, but he would take a piece or two. He has even taken my dinner from the table and put it in the fridge or thrown it out despite the fact that it was obvious I wasn't done. He also has no respect for personal property. He started using my wife's Peloton without asking. Before anyone says, "Why don't you talk to him?" Well, if I try, he either ignores me or claims he didn't know. And if he ignores you, expect things to go missing or get broken. There's more, like intentionally dumping oil into the sink, causing it to clog. He expects my father-in-law, who's in his 80s, to come and fix it because he helped out once before. So here we are frustrated and knowing that if we kick him out, he might try to take my house. He doesn't pay rent, and we've already asked him kindly to leave. We need to find a win-win solution. P.S. My kids don't see the conflict, and he doesn't have any relationship with them. Our youngest even asked, "Why is he living in the house?" I don't talk about this with my kids because I don't want to burden them with family drama, but you can imagine how great my dad's behavior is. Update. Today was the last straw. Last night, I removed the seat from the Peloton. Let me ask if someone does that, isn't it a hint? Well, instead of leaving it alone, my dad took my pillow and tried to use it as a seat. I confronted him, and he denied it. I showed him the video, and he said he was just seeing if the pillow would work. When I asked him who said he could use it, he just gave me a blank stare. I've asked him to leave, but my mom is begging me to let him stay until the tenants leave their house. I asked them both why I should wait and why he should stay in my other house. My dad just pulled out his iPad and started playing a YouTube video. What a tool! We might have to take a loss, but that's a significant amount of money that was meant for my kids. I have nothing saved for their tuition. My fault for trusting my parents, right? I will likely sell my house to fund the lawsuit and their education. All our memories gone. We love this place, but now I need to find out what kind of lawyer I need. When I was a kid, I really thought the world was a good place. Lesson learned: not all parents are good. Thank you, everyone, for your advice, support, and for taking the time to read a random guy's rant about his mistakes. Story 6. This story was told to me by a friend, and it's about her father. Since it took place around 2005, I won't be able to answer many follow-up questions. I believe the story to be true, but I can't verify it. For context, this took place in Sweden, where there's no at-will employment. Once an employee passes the initial 6-month probation period, they cannot be fired without cause, which also requires an established paper trail. My friend's father, who has since retired, was a mechanical engineer. He was around 55 when this incident happened and was very experienced in his field. In fact, he had skill sets that were nearly unique. While others could replicate his work, it would take extreme effort and cost. Teams from multiple companies in different countries would need weeks, if not months, to get up to speed on certain projects to achieve the same results. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy who did his job well, but he also pointed out problems and expected others to do the same. He was extremely solution-oriented and had no patience for office politics or maintaining a positive attitude just for show. He was the stereotypical grumpy, older engineer who really knew his stuff. He was always ready to help if you asked, but he wasn't the type to engage in team-building exercises or socializing at work. In addition to his job, he ran a small side business working on minor projects. As required by his employer, he had reported this and ensured it didn't cause any conflicts of interest. His employer knew about it and accepted it. He was a valuable employee and had received several awards during his years with the company. Although he didn't care much for the awards, they were a testament to his work. The company paid him well, respected his expertise, and accommodated his personality. In return, he worked hard and mentored younger engineers, making them effective co-workers. Then, the company was acquired by a larger firm, and a new management team took over. Initially, the new management promised that things would stay the same. However, with the new leadership came a shift in office culture. They began pushing for unpaid overtime and tried to introduce a more American corporate culture with cheering, clapping, and motivational activities. My friend's father found this extremely uncomfortable and refused to participate. His status as a long-time, knowledgeable employee protected him for a while, but eventually, the new management realized that much of the resistance to the cultural changes centered around him. They started pressuring him to conform. When he continued to refuse, they became increasingly hostile, realizing that he held a great deal of soft power within the company. After all, he had mentored a large percentage of the engineers, and his influence over them was significant. The management team began ordering him to work overtime. He responded by stating that his projects were on schedule, and if there was an emergency requiring overtime, they needed to involve the union to negotiate it. According to his contract, overtime was only permitted in emergencies. They also tried to force him to participate in the clapping and cheering events, going so far as to make attendance mandatory. When he did attend, he participated so unenthusiastically that it only made the events more uncomfortable, causing people to laugh. Work became increasingly hostile, and my friend's father knew things would come to a head soon. Being an experienced engineer, he had already documented everything and was prepared for what was to come. Eventually, management found an excuse to fire him. They caught him answering an email related to his side business on his work laptop. They brought him in and fired him on the spot, claiming it was theft of company resources. Sitting at the conference table, he looked each of the three managers in the eye and calmly asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" They all said yes. He asked again, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" When they confirmed, he was escorted by security to leave his phone, badge, and laptop at his desk before being escorted out of the building. Once outside, he immediately called his union representative, who canceled the firing, stating that there was no just cause. This meant the case would go to the labor board for arbitration. His company had a policy that allowed employees to use their work laptops for personal business, including side ventures, as long as it was during a break and complied with security protocols. The company was aware of his side business and had approved it. He had been on a break when sending the email. He sent his union representative a copy of the company policy and the documentation showing that his side business had been approved. He then called his lawyer and instructed him to send a cease and desist letter regarding 2 patents he held. These patents weren't particularly lucrative, but they were important for the solutions he designed at his job. The employer had been using them with his permission in exchange for slightly higher pay, which was documented in his contract. After that, he went home and took some time off to focus on his side business. He had saved enough money to consider retiring altogether. Within a week, 2 competitors, who had been eyeing him for some time, reached out with job offers. He graciously declined, offering to consult with them through his side business at twice his former hourly rate. They eagerly accepted. Soon, his former colleagues began calling for advice on projects that couldn't move forward without him. He politely declined, stating that he had left all necessary information with management. He told several clients the same thing when they reached out to him privately. Since his personal phone number wasn't publicly available, he figured that they must have spent time or money tracking him down. About 2 weeks later, a manager called, asking for assistance. He politely declined and, after being yelled at, responded, "I'm sorry, you must have mistaken me for someone who works for you." Then he hung up. This happened several more times before the company's human resources department called and informed him that his firing had been a mistake and that he was welcome to return. He again declined, stating that he was waiting for the labor board's decision, but was happy to consult for them at 6 times his previous hourly rate. After some negotiation, the company had no choice but to accept his terms. Shortly after, he also demanded payment for the use of his patents. Less than 2.5 weeks after being fired, he was back at his desk as a consultant. 3 months later, the case went before the labor board. The company argued that they had handled the situation correctly, but, in the spirit of goodwill, were still willing to offer him his job back. My friend's father and the union representative simply informed the board that he was now employed elsewhere through his own company and was no longer available. The labor board ruled in his favor, awarding him 3 months' worth of damages, a 24-month severance package including pension, and compensation for the union's legal fees, which the company had to cover. He continued working part-time as a consultant for the company until he retired, charging them 3 times what he charged their competitors. His managers were not fired, but they were placed in their own group for budget purposes, which meant that they consistently failed to meet their bonus targets due to the costs of his consulting fees and the labor board's arbitration. This caused at least one of the managers to resign. According to my friend, her father enjoyed joking with the management after that, often grinning and asking, "What are you going to do? Fire me?"